Today, we have a very special guest, Allen Lau, who co-founded and sold his business, Wattpad, for $660 million USD.
So we almost quit. I guess my point is idea alone is not sufficient.
Do VCs create negative value on the whole?
Next year, if you don't learn fast enough, you'll be left behind by your fast-growing company.
What do you think is a common mistake founders make when trying to raise venture capital today?
Venture capital is not for all startups. I was on a rocket ship. After 2.5 years, Wattpad started to take off.
Wow.
And it happened when
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. My name is Matan Hazanov. Today, we have a very special guest, Allen Lau, who co-founded and sold his business, Wattpad, for $660 million USD, making him one of the most successful startup founders in Canada in recent memory. And we're lucky enough to have him today to discuss the many businesses he's built, the two he's sold, and his career as a venture capitalist. If you're interested in learning how to build and scale a startup, and even if you're interested in learning more about the perspective of a VC who was a former operator, this is an episode you should tune into. Allen, thank you so much for joining us.
thanks for inviting me.
So walk us back to your background, your history, how you first got involved as an entrepreneur, the first business you built, and what led up to Wattpad.
Yeah, so perhaps want to give the audience a little bit more context. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, came to Canada when I was 19 years old. That's the summer when my whole family moved here. And I enrolled in electrical engineering at U of T and got my master there as well. And then skipping the first 9 months of my job at IBM, that on day one I knew it's the wrong company for me. I'm not a big corporate person.
Made a good choice given the stock price,
Well, that was 30 years ago. So, but it was the start of the decline, the long decline. It was, I think, in the 80s. IBM was still like Google of like today's Google or Apple or Meta. Anyway, worked for a startup company at the time. It was when my wife Eva, whom we met in engineering school, when Eva joined a startup called Arena, it was 20 people. When I joined 9 months later, it was 80 people. And then 3-4 years later, when it was acquired, it was acquired for $500 million. And that was in the mid-90s.
Wow.
That equivalent to multi-billion dollars in today's dollar value.
So wait, why did you, so your first job was at IBM, right?
Yes.
Now you joined it as a software engineer or?
Yeah, software engineer.
And why wasn't it for you? Because that seems like a dream job, right out of school, you had to work with this big corporate.
Yeah, well, that's, that's part of the Asian culture in a way. The parents would, or perhaps broadly speaking for many immigrants too, get a good job in a corporate environment, stable, and then you set for life, right? That's what I've been told, and that's why I joined. But it was so slow. The reason perhaps was not because the people were slow, it's just bureaucratic, and perhaps the development was very waterfall. And as the most junior person, I have to wait for the senior people to design the software before I could even start writing code. So I couldn't wait for too long. So after 9 months, I have to go. Anyway, back to the startup I joined. It was fascinating. Of course, as I mentioned, super, super fast growing.
Right.
When it sold, it was 800 people. That was literally in 3-4 years.
Wow.
That was the fastest rocket ship one can ever imagine. I learned from the best entrepreneurs, and then afterwards I became an entrepreneur.
Why did you? How did you join Arena? Meaning, what was your function there? What role did you get?
Software development.
Okay.
It was those were the days when people still use fax. Nowadays, most people have not even heard of it. But at that time, when you want to communicate, you put in a piece of paper in something called the fax machine. Then the information or the content goes through the phone line, and the other end would have another fax machine. It would print it out. So the software that we did was using the fax modem on built-in you bought or you you put as part of the personal computer. And we built a piece of software called WinFax. The name WinFax because it's Windows Fax. So it became an instant hit because this is the primarily how people communicate, and this is the almost like the dominant software.
It'd be like an email before email was a thing.
Exactly. Email before email, and you practically we were the monopoly in the market because we were first and also the best software, and learned so much how to like find product market fits, scale the company, scale the product, scale the operation, and learn how to kill all your competitors.
Did you end up becoming a manager? Did you have like direct reports by the time there was an exit?
By the time I left, I was the head of engineering.
Oh, wow. So who was the acquirer?
It's Symantec.
Wow.
Symantec nowadays, I think it got acquired by Broadcom. It went through various version of it. Iterations itself.
So obviously you got this bug for entrepreneurship, but it seems like you were in a good spot. It seems like it was a bit more nimble than IBM. Why leave the comfort and success that you were getting to go start another business?
Yeah, I almost quit it maybe 6 months after the acquisition. I actually handed in my resignation. I was about to join another startup. I don't think I had a good idea back then. If I had a good idea, I probably would have started my own company. But I almost joined another one. But in the dying second, I kind of reverted the decision. I guess in hindsight, it actually worked out. And let me explain. I was on a rocket ship. And the career was moving very fast. Literally every year you got to do something else, and more importantly, increase my responsibility. Just increased almost every year too, and that gave me all the management experience, all the leadership experience on a fast track. So I became the head of the development team, head of the engineering group of the entire Toronto office at the end. That took like 4 years from almost like a junior, mid-level engineer to become that, and how much you can learn in literally 1,500 days, right? And that's compressed learning curve. In hindsight, gave me a lot of tools in my toolbox when I became CEO, because I made a lot of mistakes. I was very, very young. I was so inexperienced. I had no clue how to lead. I think at that time maybe 50, 60, 70 engineers. That was a pretty big group, multiple levels under me. If you ask people who work for that group, they would probably say I was a terrible manager because I was so inexperienced, right? I think that one thing super, super helpful down the road, perhaps 10, 15 years down the road when I started Wattpad.
Right. I had another guest who said something very similar, that when you're on this rocket ship, you're just forced to learn so many things very quickly. It's and it obviously informs how you build a business later on. That's a great point. So you eventually did decide to leave. So what was the great idea that encouraged you to leave this time?
So around 1999, finally, it's time. I was so bored as a manager. I was still quite young, and not spending a lot of time on technology is kind of irritating, and I really want to go. So at that time, some of the Darina founders started an incubator. Of course, now incubator is very common, but
It's almost too common.
Almost too common, but at that time it was actually a pretty novel concept, and I was very, very intrigued by that because I still did not have a good idea what to do as a founder if I were to start a company. But if I joined an incubator, I could work on 3 or 4, 5, or maybe 2, different ideas, different companies at a time. And that's super, super, it was super appealing to me, and I joined them. that's where initially I jump around different incubators. At one point in time, maybe at any given point in time, I would be working with at least 2 companies, if not more. That was so much fun. And then maybe a year or 2 later, that's when I started my own my first company within the incubator.
So which 2 companies were those?
Yeah.
In the incubator. Yeah.
In the incubator. That was a company called InfoTreever. It doesn't exist anymore. There was another company that I worked for maybe for 3 months, 4 months. It's called Border Free. It still exists. It got acquired, got spun out, it got acquired again, got spun out. I lost track, but apparently it is a public company now. So it's I have the privilege to work on that company when they were like 5 people for a short period of time. And the InfoTreever company that I talk about is a little bit like LinkedIn, There was another company, I forgot the name. It's like an image sharing and image, somewhat like Flickr eventually, an image repository for people to share and store images. And
That would have been quite novel back in
absolutely
early 2000s.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think these 3 companies I highlighted, in a way, the ideas were right? To a degree. Perhaps they were born at the wrong time. Maybe they were way too early. Maybe they were just the execution. Maybe, just like today's Instagram wasn't using Instagram image sharing as an example of Flickr in the old days. They were not the only one, but they somehow they just became number one. There must be a reason. So I guess my point is, idea alone is not sufficient. You have to safely assume, as an entrepreneur, you have to safely assume 10 other people, perhaps 100 other people out there have very, very similar ideas, just have never heard of them.
Right. And I know a little bit about the Wattpad story, and it seems like timing is a significant factor in it almost failing and eventually being successful.
Yeah.
I think timing, too many entrepreneurs and investors don't put enough emphasis on timing, right? And it's almost impossible to time a market, right? But especially in the stock market. But I'm talking about building a business here.
Yeah.
Like, there is a time when a particular idea can work, and sometimes you could be off by 6 months. And those 6 months is when you run out of cash, right? Or you don't find success, so you quit, right? So it really makes a big difference. I don't know if there's luck or something involved in determining, if this person will get the idea and start the business and be successful versus somebody else. But timing is a big factor. So, take us to the point where you start to conceive of Wattpad. First of all, what is Wattpad? For the very few people out there that don't know what it is, not my audience, of course, because they all know what it is. But
okay, I'll give you maybe a 60-second overview of what Wattpad is. Wattpad is an online platform for people to read and share fiction, from science fiction to romance stories and poetry and everything in between. Today, it has roughly 100 million monthly users, 1 million uploads every day, and in 50 languages, practically every country on this planet, bar a few, like China, protected by a great firewall. We could never build the user base in China, for example, but it's practically everywhere. And one thing very interesting about Wattpad is in 2012, we started our first data scientist, and his name is Brandon. We'll talk about him and perhaps later on in the show. He taught us that new technology called artificial intelligence. So I guess by 2014, we became an AI company, and we use AI and, of course, other data and insights as well, and human, of course. We pick the best stories on the platform and turn them into TV shows and movies. So many of the #1 TV shows or movies on Netflix or Amazon Prime, or your favorite streaming player in Indonesia or Philippines or Europe, box office #1 in Europe, or favorite show in Latin America, actually came off the Wattpad platform.
Oh, really cool. Do you have an example of like maybe something
The
they
most
recognize?
famous one was a few years ago. There was a Netflix movie called The Kissing Booth
Mm.
that came off our platform. That was globally number one on Netflix.
So like
Uh,
a producer would look at what's popular on Wattpad
mhm.
for ideas for
Yes.
for developing a show.
Yeah, at that time it was, and then over time it evolved. Wattpad evolved into also a studio business. You know, we
Oh,
have a
okay.
Wattpad Studios division that's based on, it's all data driven. We find the best one, um, best stories on our platform, and then we own the IP, the original content. We purchase that from the writers, and we share revenue back to the writers, and then we own the script, and then we co-own the movie with or TV shows with our entertainment partners.
That's brilliant because you know that it's popular. You have a built-in audience already.
Exactly.
You can get the rights much easier than some random. You have the data. You know
Exactly.
it's working.
Exactly.
That's like a real advantage.
It's
And eventually,
very
yeah.
data driven.
I imagine eventually, of course, you sold the business. You're no longer involved, I assume.
Mhm.
But eventually, you'd be able to use AI to produce a lot of it, right? It's not as good today, but 5 years from now, you'll be able to take that and just make a video from the content, right? Like a really high quality video.
We sold 2 years before ChatGPT launched, right?
Seems a bit prescient because you can write probably fiction stories with ChatGPT also.
Yeah. So I think it was a different time, but it was pretty close to generative AI became a thing, right? So if I were to like still run the company, perhaps we could take Wattpad Studios on another level. Anyway, I guess back to the original question about the founding idea. As I mentioned, about around 1999, I joined the Arena founders who started the incubator. It's called Brightspark. Nowadays it's a venture firm as well, as some of the audience might know. But back then it wasn't just a venture firm; it was an incubator. So fast forward to 2002. I co-founded within Brightspark. I co-founded a company called Tira Wireless. Keep a long story short, it's a mobile gaming company. But remember, in 2002, it was 5 years, 6 years before the iPhone or the App Store came out. So when I say mobile games,
but like Snake
on the phones,
Tetris maybe.
Yeah, that type of game. And over a weekend, because one tiny secret, I don't really play games. We kind of accidentally evolved into a gaming gaming business, but I wasn't too passionate about it, to be frank. And if you look at my media consumption, I read and I read and I read. So the idea over the weekend was, well, perhaps I could write an app on the Nokia phone or even the Motorola flip phone didn't exist back then, on the candy bar Nokia phone. Can I write a mobile reading app? And I did that. And I like it. But to read a sentence, you have to scroll like 3 times because the phone's, like the screen size was so tiny, right? So I didn't pursue the idea for that reason. And then fast forward to year 2006, the most popular phone was the flip phone, the Razr phone. And
had a modestly bigger screen, the Razr phone.
Yes, but I was silly enough to convince myself, well, it's no longer 3 lines of text on the screen, it's 10 lines. It's good enough. So I resurrected that idea. And then my Wattpad co-founder Ivan, at that time, we were already friends for many years because he also worked for Tira. That's how we met in 2002. He one day instant messaged me, "Hey, Alan, I'm working on a new product idea." And when I look at what he sent me, it was a mobile reading app as well. Like literally the two of us came up with the same idea, and we were friends and we didn't know each other were working on the same thing. And at that time, want to give the audience a little bit more context. It was 2006. So YouTube was 1 year old. Facebook was, I think, a 200-person company. So user-generated content was also a brand new concept at that time. Of course, now everyone is doing that, right? But at that time, it was pretty nascent. And Ivan's idea was to combine mobile reading and a UGC platform so that people can freely share what they write and consume on mobile.
In 2006, how would you share it with these phones?
These phones actually are internet capable. They you can, for example, you go to Rogers or AT&T, you can buy a mobile data plan. It's very hidden, very, you have to go to 10 pages down before you can buy that product. But I remember, because we did mobile gaming, right? We had to, that has to be part of the way for people to download. So it's very small numbers at that time, but to pay for 1 megabyte itself, the unit was 1 megabyte. 1 megabyte or 10 megabyte was $10.
Oh my gosh.
It's 10 seconds of a TikTok video these days, right? So it was a very different time.
Right. So 2006, you're developing this app. Now, what happened next? Because clearly, to me, it doesn't sound like something, an idea like that can take off. Because essentially, it sounds to me like you're building a two-sided marketplace, right? Where you have people developing content and people consuming content. You need scale to do that in any way that makes sense as a business.
Well, at that time, even the term product market fits didn't exist. Marketplace, forget about it. The internet was pretty new. So we didn't realize we were building a marketplace for readers and connecting the readers and the writers, at least conceptually. Of course, we were building it. We just didn't realize we were, right? So we ran into a lot of problems. So the first year, we had maybe 1,000 users, and why they came, and we were...
That's a lot, by the way. Even that, 1,000 users.
Well, if you run a B2B SaaS company, if you have 1,000 customers in the first year, great, you made it, right? For a free product with no business model, and you only got 1,000 people using it out of 7 billion or 5 billion internet users on the planet, your product sucks. So we were in that sucky phase without finding product market fit.
And you're doing it full time.
Yes. We did it full time for about a year, and the one thing we were very lucky, perhaps we were smart enough to figure out early on, was that chicken and egg problem, right? The cold start problem of any marketplace. Like in this case, without any writer, there's no content. Without any content, there's no reader. Without any reader, I cannot attract any writer.
Right, exactly.
That loop just perpetual. It's perpetual if you cannot get out of that. So we imported 17,000 public domain books. The 1,000 users or readers that I talk about, they were all classic book readers. The upload or create or write button has been on the website all along. Not a single person clicked that button. So it was absolutely depressing. So we almost quit by in the second half of 2007, about a year after we started the company. Ivan and I had a conversation like, what should we do? Like, it's not sustainable. We all quit our jobs to do it. And one of us said, well, our hosting cost is only $5. We are $5, $3 away from break even because we have some display ads from Google. We got a $2 check from Google.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so $3 from break even. So we did not fully give up, but clearly we could not work on this full time. So we were trying to get part-time jobs, contract jobs, and crazy enough to even start another company. It's a mobile advertising startup. I'll spare you some of the details on the side. That was a very, very difficult 2 year, maybe a year and a half period after that. from 2007 to 2008, we were literally doing 5 things to keep us stay alive, basically. And then the 2 things happened around the time, like towards the end, maybe Q4 2008, around that time. The mobile advertising business is actually doing okay. It's not amazing, but we got acquired. Because it's a nascent new technology that people start to hype up, and at that time, to give the audience a little bit more context, Google did not do any mobile advertising. Even it was new to Google. It was how early the market was. So we actually built something that is nascent, useful, kind of attractive, still uber small, but someone acquired that mobile advertising business. And the second thing I want to say is, after 2.5 years, almost 3 years, Wattpad started to take off.
Wow.
And it happened when one teenage girl posted a teenage romance story on Wattpad, and she asked all her friends to come check out her story, and many of them came. They were like commenting, "Wow, this is so good! I can't wait to read the next chapter." And that perhaps attracted the second writer. It wasn't.
She was your first writer.
Yeah. First writer, and then maybe a few weeks later, the second writer. Maybe a week or 2 later, the third writer. And then the time between each writer sign-ups starting to decrease, compress, right? And then perhaps I would say 9 months later, we finally felt like we reached product market fit.
Wow. So when did that happen? When you found that when that first writer published on Wattpad?
Yeah, we of course we talked to her. We observed her behavior. I think we learned a lot from the behavior of both that writer, and the readers, because for example, we always thought people would just write the full book and then upload the whole thing. Of course, in hindsight, it's so obvious. People don't do that. People write a chapter and perhaps want to get some instant feedback, and they upload already. So we didn't design the product like that. So that took a lot of effort to kind of re-engineer that. We didn't have the concept of chapter, right? And then we realized, wow, the most powerful thing is not just the content, it's the comments. The comments are also very entertaining. So over time, we improved the comment feature a lot. That became part of the engagement and the entertainment, right? So I'm just highlighting these 2.
When was that? Did that person write that content? Like around what?
It was, I think, towards the end of 2008.
Wow. Okay. This would be after the iPhone is released, right?
It was, yes, after the iPhone released, and I think it's worth mentioning. iPhone released in the summer of 2007, but it did not have the App Store. Even Steve Jobs initially was very dismissive about the concept of the app. And then every developer on the planet asked for, can you do an App Store? And then the App Store came in the summer of 2008. That was game-changing for us, because finally we could have an app on the iPhone as well. Before that, it was just using the Safari on the phone. And then around that time, a company that was acquired by Google, maybe in 2005 or 6, launched a product called Android. Android also became starting to become popular, mostly in 2009, but it launched in, I think, around the time when App Store came out in the summer or late 2008. These 2 was the timing thing that we talked about earlier, because one thing we also learned from our users, they don't glue to their desktop PCs, right? They are consumer, and that's how they, using the phones, was how they primarily access the internet if they have a choice. So we quickly realized many of our users are using iPod, maybe the cheaper version of the iPhone, but they still support the App Store, and they use Wi-Fi to connect if they didn't have the mobile internet on the phone. So that was game changing. I guess the lessons learned as an entrepreneur is sometimes you might have the right idea, but if the infrastructure to support that idea does not exist, there's nothing you can do. You have to. Sometimes you have to wait for the right timing. Sometimes, in our case, we perhaps coincidence, perhaps is our foresight, because when we first started, we know even the flip phone might be a little bit early, but we could extrapolate the phone capabilities, and we thought, well, maybe we are a year too early, but if the phone capabilities continue to improve at this pace, we would hit the right market at the right time. Right. I think that's the first initial thesis.
And up until this point, you didn't raise any venture capital, I assume. No. It was all bootstrapped.
No. All bootstrapped, because we want to launch the product first. Both Evan and I are engineers. We can just build it ourselves. And we want to get some traction before we talk to any investor.
I think that's very important, not just because investors would take you seriously only after traction, but the fact that you were running this thing on $3, $5 a month, whatever, after getting paid by Google, $2 a month, is that you were able to put this on ice essentially, while letting it, people could still go on and read and do whatever. But if you raised money and had a big overhead and you did the same thing, you would have had to shut down the business.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think now that I believe this concept still applies nowadays. If you builder, if you have a technical co-founder, I don't mean to suggest that the whole team needs to be like all technical, but if the team itself can build the product, perhaps not raising capital at the idea phase, it's not a bad idea. You once you launch the product, even though it's very rough, it could be in beta form. You learn so much from the early adopters, even though that early adopter could be early adopter, one. In our case, the first one. We learned so much in the first day after she uploaded the first chapter.
Right. It's interesting because I could take myself back. I wasn't that old back then. I was born in 1989, so it would have been 16, 17, 18, whatever. And I knew of YouTube. I watched a little bit of YouTube back then. It wasn't so easy. But I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of a person back then. It's like, I'm going to write a book or write a story and publish it on this website. If I wanted to, I could just write the stuff myself and send it to my friends. Like, what did the platform function to do that you figured out that someone like that teenage girl was like, okay, I'm going to publish it here? Was it for reach? I can't imagine it was, because there probably weren't that many users. Like, what was it that encouraged that person to do that, to publish on your platform?
Yeah, I guess we'll never know. Perhaps she does not even know.
If she's watching this right now, by the way, I should probably know who she is. Reach out. We want to hear your story. Why did you publish on Wattpad all those years ago?
I want to know too. I guess maybe one feature, if I have to guess, and I.
By the way, what was the name of the story? Do you remember?
I don't. It's somewhere in my scribble notes.
Okay, we'll find it out. We'll put it in the show notes.
Back off my hand. But
by the way, she's just because she was a teenager back then. She's probably my age, right?
Yeah.
So you're in your 30s. We'll make you internet famous. All 10 of my audience will listen to this. Okay, let's go.
Yeah. So anyway, back to the feature that I want to talk about. On our homepage, we show the most popular by number of reads. Like we call it the hot list, or what's hot at that time. I think if I have to guess, it was all classic books, as I mentioned. But if I were the first writer, I saw this little website as catered to people for gravitate towards like creative writing, and no one is writing it. And if I'm the first one writing it, I would be on the homepage.
Right.
So I think the perhaps vaguely remember when people talk about the early days of YouTube, for example. Discovery was a little bit easier if you are early because you only have like 5 other YouTubers to fight for attention, right? So it's pretty easy to get the homepage, advantage.
Right. So you start to see the amount of writers joining the platform. I guess at this point you're doing this now full time again. You see that the timing is right. What happens next?
Yeah. So we raised a seed round because again the mobile advertising startup was acquired. We worked there for a year. So we need more capital for mostly for hiring people because it's starting to take off. We need to build a team, but we just could not afford that many people. So we raised a very small round, like $500,000, so that we can hire co-ops, hire interns, so that we can move a little bit faster. And then a year later,
this was in 2008 or 2009.
We raised that towards the end of 2009. If you Google it, it's actually covered by TechCrunch. I think that article is still there. It was announced in early 2010.
I see.
But technically, I think it's closed just before Christmas.
Right. A little bit of insider baseball is that whenever you hear the round close in the media, it's closed many months before.
Yeah, exactly. Same case here. So leveraging that, capital, we were able to move, the product move quite a bit faster. The growth started to accelerate. I think towards, I can't remember the numbers anymore, but by 2011, a year later, we hit 1 million users or something. And then we raised our first institutional round. That was the Series A. I have to clarify. Nowadays we call it seed right now.
Right. And what you did before was a pre-seed, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The terminologies are a little bit different.
These terminologies don't mean anything to me anyways, but yeah.
That's also true. We see $1 billion seed round.
Right. We just talked about, right? One of the OpenAI, whatever face of Mira Murati, I think she's raising a $2 billion seed round. Once there's a billion thrown around, it's no longer anything. It's just, there's no numbers, there's no seed, there's no A.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So back to 2011, we raised our Series A. Now we call that seed. That's a $3.5 million round led by Unit Square Ventures in New York. They are pretty well-known tier one firm. I think they wrote the first check to Twitter, Zynga, more recently Coinbase, MongoDB, Cloudflare. I think Cloudflare perhaps not the first check. I think it's later, but that's not the point. The point is they know how to build their portfolio. They have a good eye. They have good eyes on what's next, right? So very fortunate to have them invested at that round. We learned a lot from that portfolio CEOs and those the partners from Unit Square as well. And then I guess the rest is history.
So how big, just for context here, how big did Wattpad get before you exited in terms of users and employees and all that stuff?
Users are roughly just under 100 million monthly users. So it took about 10 years to grow from 1 million to 100. 1 million uploads per day, 5 million monthly writers, roughly 300 employees, just under 300, but we actually grew a bit right after the acquisition, so maybe a hair under 300 around that time. So yeah, that's the scale. We in perhaps more context. In total, we raised over 10 years. Last round was 2018. So from 2011 to 2018, we raised just under 120 million US dollars in venture funding. I think nowadays it looks a little bit small, almost, right? But you have to think about it was a very different time when Series A was actually called seed now. our Series B, led by Khosla Ventures, I think it was 17 million. Can't remember the number anymore. I think 17, 18 million or 16. That was actually the largest round of venture funding raised by a Canadian company after the .com.
Wow.
It was very, very large at that time, but now a seed round, it's $1 billion.
Right.
Even like seed round, typical Canadian seed round is like $5-10 million these days. So it was a very different time.
Right. Did you ever meet Vinod Khosla?
Oh yeah. He flew on his private jet to come here to close the round.
Yeah. He has very interesting opinions on venture capital.
Yep.
Curious, what do you think of his did he lead the round or he just
he led the round?
He led the round.
He led a B round. Vinod, of course I met him during the pitch multiple times. So we went to the Valley, and then the closing, the final negotiation, he flew on his private to Toronto. But I met with him regularly, and he, for example, he works quite differently than other venture firms. I have the insider look, of course. We met at least once per year. It's called the annual CEO meeting. He met with, I'm not sure about now, but at that time, I think he has 150 portfolio CEOs, and he met every single one of them once per year. So, and of course, sometimes other meetings too. I would say his philosophy is very bold, very pushy in a way. But perhaps if you see him on X or Twitter or other social media or other interviews, he would be a little bit more pushy than the real person. I think he asks tough questions, but I would say still somewhat more respectful. Not saying he's not respectful when he does media interviews, but he's blunt. He's very opinionated, very blunt.
Which you would expect for someone that's as successful as him doing what he does. Of course, he sees all these great entrepreneurs. He said one thing that I found to be very odd. I'm curious what you think about it. I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm going to butcher the exact quote. He said something like 95% of venture capital firms create negative value or add negative value or something like that. Now you're a VC also, so you have that perspective as well. What do you think about that? Do VCs create negative value on the whole? Aside from the capital, of course.
Okay, I think I would disagree with him on. I don't know how he can quantify that, and I don't even know whether you can.
I think his general point is that VCs suck except for writing checks.
That I think he has his point. I think for VCs, there's a lot. There's a asymmetrical power dynamics, right? Because you write the checks. You're a part owner, but you don't operate the company, and many times, especially for first time founders, that asymmetrical dynamics could be toxic, could be unhelpful. So I don't think he's wrong, and this is something I absolutely I have a lot of respect to Vinod because he talked about this point, and I take this to heart. So as a VC, you have to make sure everything you say, everything you do, how you help, actually helpful. And it's quite rare. For example, I would say, hey, founder, you should do this or you should do that, because I don't have the full context of the founder. As much as I'm involved, I'm not inside the company, right? There are so many things I don't see, right? So the way I help our founders, I would say I share experience. I share what I see, and because I started 3 companies, right? In a way, I don't have to tell them what to do. I could tell them, okay, I've seen this before twice or 5 times before. These are the 3 ways that I solve this problem. I'm not saying these are the only 3, but at least since you might not know exactly what to do, maybe these 3 are the good multiple choices. I narrow down from infinite choices to 3, maybe a combination of the 3 are, but it's 100% your call.
Right.
I think that would be very helpful. Or another way to frame it is I provide framework. I help the CEOs to make high quality decisions rather than telling them you should do this or that.
Right.
I think the only thing I would say you should is when we go out for dinner, I think you really should try the sushi here. It's really good.
Right. Very good. So I want to go back to Wattpad for a second.
Yeah.
We talked about this concept of product market fit a lot. It's a big, thrown around quite a lot in VC land and startup land. I don't think most people know what it means. I don't even know what it means, but I'll talk about it because that's what I do. I talk about things on the internet I don't know much about. So at what point did you know that you had product market fit? Was it at that 1 million users or was it some other point?
Yeah, I think a lot of the founders, they mistakenly believe that you can quantify product market fit. Of course, the numbers don't lie. Of course, perhaps 1 million ARR or 500,000 users or pick your KPI. Of course, that will give you the indication, but you can also, for example, spend more on performance marketing to juice the ARR, then you have the fake product market fit, right? So at least in my experience, and not just my own experience, but also looking at the portfolio companies, product market fit is not a moment in time. It's not like yesterday you did not have product market fit and you wake up in the morning, voila, today you have product market fit. It doesn't quite work this way. So it's almost like a phase that you're going through. Every day goes by, you have more confidence that things are working, things are growing faster. I think in my case, if I have to pick one aha moment, I'm not saying this is the only indicator, but this is the one of the moments that I remember was during that 2008, 2009 period when I started from 1 writer to perhaps 1,000, perhaps a few thousand. I have funny habits that I did in the evening. Because Wattpad is also a social network. Like the writers, the readers, they can follow the writers, and of course the writers they can follow each other. It's the social graph is actually quite prominent. I can look at like many social networks these days. I can just trace through and see who is connected to who, right? So the thing that I usually did in the evening was start off with the one of the writers and then follow the social graph and see what new people I can encounter. Mostly I want to bump into new writers because we collectively as a team, we spend a lot of time interacting directly with the writers early on. That's very powerful. We learn so much. But anyway, I digress. There was one evening I keep on running into new writers. It's like an endless journey. I spend over an hour and I keep on running into new people. That was the aha moment that, okay, I think we hit something called a critical mass. And that was the moment. But again, you cannot fully use one thing to quantify. It's not 1,000 writers good, 999 is before product market fit. It doesn't quite work this way.
That's fascinating. So you were doing your own kind of like sleuthing through the website and you just kept encountering more and more writers.
Yeah.
Whereas before I imagine it was like, okay, you do for 20 minutes, you're kind of done.
It's going into circles, right? I'm into the same people.
Right. That's fascinating. To get to that point though, what would you say are some major lessons you learned about getting to that point? Keep continuously iterating on the product or the what did you do to get to that point?
Yeah. I think, again, it was almost 20 years ago, right? So the tactics perhaps obsolete, but the mindset is actually timeless. So I'll highlight a few things. I guess the first point we kind of touched on already, if you can build a product, perhaps you shouldn't raise any capital. roll this out, get some feedback. It could be bad, but that's okay. At least you know you have a sucky product, right? The second thing, perhaps because of the nature of the product, we actually iterate pretty fast. Ivan is one of the fastest developer that I've ever worked with. So we would roll out things like every day, sometimes multiple times per day. Sometimes whenever it's done, we just roll this out, and if it blows up, sometimes it's too buggy, we monitor and then roll back. And I think that's philosophy carry all the way to when Wattpad became a scale up. We encourage the developers to roll out quickly, roll out to 0.1% of our users. If it doesn't work, backtrack, press the undo button, no harm done. So fast iteration, very important. Learn from your customer, learn from your users. We spent a lot of time on that. Not saying they would tell you what features to build, but you understand the problems better. And you understand your solution to their problems better. And that feedback loop, if you can flow it back to the product, to people who are writing code. At that time, we were so small. It's the same person. It's the left brain to the right brain. You move so much faster than your competitors. We were not the only one doing this. Mobile reading, I think there were a handful, not a lot, but there were a handful. UGC, even on fiction, there were a few, but very few people combine the two. And that's a good segue into my last point is we were, without realizing, we were globally number one on one thing. If you want to find a UGC platform, write fiction on it, and consume on mobile, we were the world number one. It was so niche, right? But I think we were world number one. If you Google it at that time, we probably, I think actually we were on the front page of Google, if you Google that. So I guess these are timeless strategies to get to product market fits. I think in today's context, a little bit different as generative AI can write all the code for you, or 95% of the code for you. So everything I said, you can 10x the compress the time, right? You can iterate even faster. But 20 years ago or 15 years ago, talk to your users, talk to your customers. You still have to do it today. You can't get away from that.
Right. So there's a lively debate in VC land. You're probably familiar with it. That at a certain point, the person who started the business is not the best person to lead it to scale, right? And that's I'll call it a lively debate. And of course, there's different people in that. Yeah. Data shows it's better. There's better outcomes when you keep the initial founders to lead the company through. But obviously, it's not always the best thing to do. You stayed on, obviously, and you really built this business. And you're co-founder. And you need to hire a lot of people under you, and you have to become a better manager, and it requires a different kind of skill set, right? So there's a couple of questions there. One is, how did you hire the best people? Like, what did you do to hire the best people? Any insights on that? And then what did you do yourself to really develop yourself into someone that can manage and lead hundreds of people in this kind of scale up?
Yeah. I guess before I answer these two questions, maybe I'll address the VC question first. I think it's really, really sad that many VCs have that view that they have to replace the founders. I think for technology companies, this is tragic. And I think Vinod is absolutely right. I think he talked about this too. I don't think he's the only one talk about this, but even not just Canadian VCs, but Valley VCs, some of them have that view too. Why this is tragic is because most of the technology companies, the great one, they are disruptive, right? And you have to understand these three things: technology, the product, and the commercialization. These are three different phases, three different things of a startup. Fully understand all three before you make a lot of the strategic decisions, because many of them, they are doing things first time in the universe. There's no precedence, right? So without a professional CEO would never be able to do that. Well, most, I should say, I shouldn't say all. But I think the founder advantage is actually you know the first employee, you know the first line of code, you know your first customer, you know your first user, and that institutional knowledge is so important in these companies. And that's why it's a long way to say, if you even look at our portfolio, I think almost all of them, all the CEOs, the technical co-founders, and they continue to scale themselves. So I guess that's a good segue into the two questions that you asked. I guess I always joke that if you're an engineer, you understand Schrodinger equations in quantum physics or understand Maxwell equations in electromagnetic waves. Then understanding top line, bottom line, EBITDA is just simple math, right? Relatively speaking, you can learn that. I'm saying this half jokingly. I'm not saying accounting or other disciplines are easy, but I would say they are. You have to make an effort to learn, but it's learnable as a CEO. You just have to be good enough. You can hire the best accountants to work for you, but you still have to understand the spreadsheet. But you don't need to be excel at that.
Right.
So I guess as for me, I would say this is one thing I tell all my portfolio CEOs. You might not have the skill on the commercialization side, or scale up side yet, but that's okay. That's a learnable skill as long as you want to learn. And if you look at yourself, you can in a way feel like you are unrecognizable every 2 years because you're growing so fast. Then you are in a good spot. Otherwise, you might be left behind by your own fast growing company, because like every 2 years, if I look at my calendar, perhaps even every year, the skills that I have need to have, my calendar, how I spend my time, drastically different. And you just have to be a quick learner. But most of the technical co-founders, they could do that. And I think in terms of hiring, there's no simple answer, but I'll hit on a few quick things of how I build the culture, maintain the culture, and perhaps amplify the culture. I interview every final candidate, even at 300 people. That's a lot of people, right? And not only that, and by the way, I do want to mention, I want to make sure I don't do the assessment. My team would do that. I have the veto right, but I usually don't exercise that. My goal is to make sure before day one of that employee, I already know that person. I know the family, I know the life history, I know their hobbies, I know what they like. In a way that's really helpful to build the culture, because you already know every single employee. If there's a problem in the company, if you don't even know them, do you think that employee will tell you? It's very scary to bump into CEO, hey, Alan, we have a problem in the company, right? So knowing that, lower that barrier, in a way, having that conversation allow me to kind of let the culture influence them and let me know all the problems in the company firsthand. And number two, even at 300 people, I have one-on-one meetings with every single one of them.
Oh my God.
Sounds scary, but 50 weeks per year, only 6 one-on-ones per week. And each one, say, half an hour, is 3 hours of your time. That's maybe 5% of my working hours. And if you ask any CEO, hey, you spend 5% of your time, you can make sure all your employees are much more engaged. You know all the problems in the company. You can influence them directly. Would you spend that 5% of your time? No CEO would say no. It's actually best time I spend as a CEO. I'm just using these two as an examples.
Right. I imagine if you got to 3,000 people, you may have to change that a little bit.
Yeah, maybe once every 2 years I do the one-on-one, but
Would you have maintained that kind of
I think
cadence?
I would. I think having the one-on-one dialogue is very important. It cannot be replaced by a group meeting of 10 people because no one would raise their hand to talk about some of the tricky problems, right?
Right.
So I have to provide a safe space for them to talk, um, and I have a lot of homework to do before the one-on-one because I don't want them to tell me I can already read in the job description, for example, right? Into the meeting once per year when we had 300 people. You don't have to tell me what you do. I read your job description, but maybe you want to highlight one or two that we need to talk about. We need to zoom in, especially the problematic areas. I want to hear about problems. I don't want to hear about praise.
So that would be the focus of the meeting is tell me what's going on. What's the problems you're seeing?
Yeah. And how I can help them to solve that problem.
Imagine
yeah.
you come up with long notes for all the just constant problems that.
Oh yeah. So there was 1 week, it's kind of funny. I don't know how we schedule. I talked to 5 engineers. They all mentioned the exact same problem to me. And I have to one-on-one with the engineering manager or the head of engineering after all 5, just coincidental. And by the time I talked to him, well, you don't have to tell me. I heard this 5 times this morning already. Then we instantly got into problem-solving mode with all the context already.
Wow, that's amazing. So you sold the business in 2021, right?
Yes.
Why did you decide to sell and why then?
We didn't put up the for sale sign. That year, in January 2020, the company objective, there were quite a few, but one of the objectives is to make sure the company is IPO ready. So what that really means when I explain to the team is doesn't mean we want to be IPO. Maybe it's a really bad thing to do, but we want to be ready if we choose to.
January 2020. This would be a couple months before COVID was declared.
Correct.
The global pandemic. Okay.
Yes.
Fun times.
So fun time. We by saying IPO ready, we also mean if we don't have to raise more capital, we don't have to. But if we choose to raise more capital, we could. So that's all set and starting to execute. And then the pandemic hits. We were scrambling to make everything work again. And then out in the blue by mid-2020, an inbound offer came. I
imagine your traffic went up during the restrictions, right?
Yes, absolutely. Literally, when Italy locked down, I think Italy and Spain locked down first. Of course, China first, but we didn't have any users. When Italy locked down, we instantly saw a 50% increase in traffic. Spain, the same thing. When we saw these 2 countries, the tsunami is coming. We have a big problem. So that's why we were scrambling because we just could not scale that quickly.
Like more server space, you mean, type thing?
Yeah, we are using AWS, but there are many breaking points. The bottleneck, it just breaks. It's not like you can press a button, buy more servers. We could, but there are other things that broke, right? What's so interesting was a big part of our revenue stream was advertising, and no one advertised. So in a way, it's also a problem because with more traffic, but no one advertised, our revenue per user actually dropped. So they kind of perfectly offset each other. So you might think financially we would be better off. Actually, no, it was pretty flat actually during the time. It's perfectly offset each other. So, anyway, I digress. That's the side point. Anyway, we had an inbound offer. We thought, well, we told the team we want the optionality that raise more capital, not raise, IPO, not IPO. And one of the options, perhaps as M&A, we never consider, we never look into that. We never even talk about this in the board meeting, which is kind of unusual situation because many VCs would push for hey, where's your exit strategy? Side point, one thing we learned, we never ask our portfolio companies to sell. Focus on building a great business. The exit strategy, we can figure it out down the road. When the inbound offer came, we one of our investors is called Rain, RAINE. They are a merchant bank. They have a venture arm. They have a growth venture fund, but they also do investment banking. And they knew us for 7 years already. They know the business inside out because of the investment, right? So we hired their advisory team, ran the process. Before we knew, we had 4 offers on the table. And they did an amazing job, ultimately we chose to sell because I think there are many reasons, in no particular order. For us at that time, to fully unlock the business, especially like the entertainment business, that's our newest business model, the third business model, in addition to advertising and subscription. The entertainment movie business was the third one, and that's also the most capital intensive one. We have been doing that, but to fully unlock that potential, we have to raise perhaps another $100 million, if not more. And we could do that, but not sure it would provide the best outcome for everyone, including the investors, because it would be very dilutive, very high risk. We will already raise Series D. It's almost like raising $100 million for a C-stage company or Series A company inside our Series D company. So that math doesn't quite work, but that's probably the best choice we had at that time. So we were thinking, but the M&A opportunity provided us was, especially Naver, the eventual acquirer, is they have the capital, they understand the business. They were already doing this in Korea, in East Asia, with the entertainment business, with virtually an identical business model. So it's not like we have to convince the acquirer this is the right thing to do. They were convincing us we have the capital to help you amplify. So that's perfect. So that's one of the main reasons. And of course, the price was very, very good as well.
$660 million USD good.
Yeah, so it's good. I think all the investors would be very happy, even including the last round. Everyone would be happy. Many employees would be very happy as well with a big fat check. That's the power of stock option, right? So I think all things considered, it was the best option for us at that time.
Right. That's an amazing story, by the way. And again, you're one of the most successful startup founders in Canada. So, you're an example of what other people can and should do in Canada. You didn't go to the US, it doesn't sound like. So that's a very interesting thing.
Yeah. Vinod asked us to open up an office or initially move and open up an office in the Valley. I said, no, we want to build this in Canada. I think this actually gives us the unfair advantage that is almost in plain sight, but nobody sees it. Nobody saw it. I think I want to double click on this point because if everyone is doing this, then you have no advantage. That's why I'm not saying going to the Valley is the bad thing. I'm not saying learning from Valley is the bad thing. In fact, I went there a lot. I learned so much from the Valley investors and the ecosystem there. But people don't realize it's so competitive on so many fronts. Yes, there are more VCs there, but there are also a million times more startups there, right? To compete for that capital is easier said than done. Talent as well, and many other things. So that's why I told Vino, and I think it turned out to be the right call, was we could be the bigger fish in a smaller pond. And we were like 25 people back then.
Wow.
right? And turned out to be right. We could hire the best talent in a smaller ecosystem if we are the biggest fish, or one of the biggest fish in a relatively smaller pond. But that pond has to be good enough, has to be sizable. And Toronto, including Waterloo, I think we are not very big, but we are not small.
Right. It's an important point because despite the fact that we are a much smaller market, you can sell to the US relatively easily, assuming tariffs don't really impact the tech world as much, and hopefully they won't. The other advantage today, back then it may not have been an advance with currency, the exchange rate, because if you're raising in US dollars, but you're hiring in Canadian dollars, there's a huge, you're saving 50%, not only because of the exchange rate, but because talent is less expensive here. Not only on a dollar for dollar basis, but just, it's just not as expensive. So there's quite a lot of advantages to starting and building a business in Canada. Now, hopefully that continues to be the case, and not the currency stuff, but that the advantages that we have in Canada remain. But I feel like a lot of that is on the edges is collapsing a little bit, and it's starting to make more sense for companies to go to the US. But it's good that you didn't, and you set a path for many Canadian entrepreneurs. So that's great. I do want to ask, you sold the business. You can, in theory, retire. You don't need to work again. Why start a venture capital firm?
Well, the origin of Two Small Fish was not after I exited. As actually, my wife Eva and I co-founded in 2015. She was one of the founding team members at that time. She joined us in 08, 09, around that time, around the first writer, maybe. After the first writer joined us, that's when she joined us. Definitely before product market fit. But after raising the round from Vinod, well, not because of Vinod, it's because the company is scaling up and she's not a large company person. So she left and then started Two Small Fish. So skip a few steps here. After the exit, I didn't feel like I have another startup in me. As much as I loved what I do, it took 15 years, right? Do I want to, if I have almost guaranteed that I could build something bigger than Wattpad, maybe I would consider. But there's no guarantee, number one. And 15, 20 years and another startup, probably too much for me. So I have Two Small Fish in front of me. I want to work with entrepreneurs. I'm still very entrepreneurial. I'm a founder. And as an entrepreneur, that DNA will not change. And it's already in front of me, and I may as well take it. So
so your wife was making investments during this period from 2015?
Yeah. From 15 to 21, she was the solo GP. She's still the solo GP. I'm the operating partner. Because I look at new investments occasionally. I love that too. But I enjoy more, if I have to pick, I enjoy more working with founders. So that's why if you look at my title, is co-founder and operating partner, because truthfully, I spend 80% of my time to help founders solve very tricky problems. Sometimes founders might, they have no one to talk to. CEO is a very lonely job. CEO is if you're a non-CEO, you have a boss, right? You have someone to talk to in that conversation, your boss can potentially help you problem solve, but CEO does not have that luxury, right? So it's actually very challenging, and I could be that sounding board. I don't need to repeat what I said. It's not like I tell the CEOs what to do, but sharing with them I've seen this 5 times. Potentially this is how you could solve the problem. That's super, super helpful to them. So I spend a lot of time with them in meetings like that to solve tricky problems that otherwise no one else can help them solve.
How do you look at or leverage your experience as an operator when you and Eva are making investment decisions?
Yeah, I think that's our unfair advantages in a way, because sometimes, especially first-time founders, pitch an idea. Well, we can just tell it doesn't quite scale. You run into this problem. You have that issue. You won't find product market fits, for example, because of this or that. Of course, I'm not suggesting we are always right, but at least we have that lens, we have that perspective, and throughout that conversation, sometimes the founders, oh shoot, I never thought about this, right? And that's super helpful. And perhaps we might not invest, perhaps we would invest. It depends. But one way or the other is actually very helpful to the founders, even through the pitching experience.
Well, what do you think is a common mistake founders make when trying to raise venture capital today?
I would say not knowing the purpose of the capital. Sometimes they raise the wrong capital, because venture capital is not for all startups. Venture capital is for a very distinct subset of startups. I emphasize might not be better. Come back to this point, perhaps, if we have time. That type of the venture backable startups, they have to fit the following criteria. They need a lot of capital. Without the capital, they cannot unlock the business. They could on that very high growth trajectory, whatever the KPI is. It could be revenue, could be user, could be other metrics, right? And they could become the leader or one of the leaders or category leaders in one of a very large market. So some startups, they can be amazing startups, but they could cap out at maybe $10 million in revenue, maybe 50, maybe even 100. But they don't need a lot of capital to get there, then you shouldn't raise venture capital, right? If simple math, if you raise rounds after rounds after rounds, you sell the company for $1 billion, you own 10% of the company, the founders would take home $100 million. But if you sell a bootstrapped company, you own 100% for $100 million, the outcome exactly the same, right? So you have to pick the right type of capital. Perhaps venture capital might not be the right type of capital for you. Perhaps there are other alternatives. Perhaps you can bootstrap, use revenue, your customers to fund you. If you could do that, that's great, and you shouldn't raise from VCs. One very interesting point is nowadays with generative AI, you can do so much more without a lot of people. And usually you raise venture fund because you have to build a team. So that dynamics have changed a bit. Perhaps we are seeing some startups could be highly scalable. They might not need to have as much capital as before. Maybe just raising after seed round, they need that to build the initial team, but they can really quickly scale the revenue to be profitable. Then they never need enter any other venture funding again. This type of dynamics almost never existed in the past, but now it's possible. So it's a very fast changing pace. I'm
seeing a lot more companies now where with 3, 4, 5 people, they're getting to millions of dollars in ARR.
Exactly.
And they don't need much more than that,
Yeah.
And they're getting to profitability. They maybe raise a few $100,000 and that's it. It's crazy. I've never seen this before. I know back in the day, I don't know if you've probably experienced this as well, you would see the increase in employees as part of the progress of the business.
That's right.
Right? You raise capital, you're growing a certain amount, that means more employees.
Yep.
And something happened to me personally, maybe like a few months ago. I'm like, more employees is actually maybe a red flag here.
Absolutely.
Like that changed for me like a few months ago.
Absolutely. Some of our best performing portfolio companies from the revenue perspective actually super lean, more lean than it used to be.
Yeah.
So I think the unrecognizable every 2 years thing that I talk about not only applies to CEOs, perhaps applies to VCs as well. I should take my own advice, or we should all take our own advice.
So last couple of questions here. I just wanted to get your sense of, do you have any like book recommendations for entrepreneurs that have helped you in your journey?
I don't have any recommendation for like this is the book. Once you read that book, you become an awesome entrepreneur. It doesn't quite work this way. There are a lot of amazing articles, blog posts. I think some of them are very niche. They are specific to, say, finding product market fits. They are experts out there. Follow that. That's probably not a bad idea. Pick the best of that particular category that you're looking for. Category of entrepreneurship that you're looking for. By the way, I write some too. Follow me on Allen's Thoughts. I ran a reading writing company. That's how my brain functions. I kind of write this because I just want to write it down so that I can clear my thoughts. But if you are interested, follow me on Allen's Thoughts as well.
I'll leave a link down below, of course.
Yeah. So, but anyway, talk to the book. I do have a book that I would recommend people to read. I would say in perhaps 5 years ago, I didn't even have to think too much about geopolitics. But in this new environment, you have to understand the dynamics for a few reasons. Of course, understand the tariffs, understand why they're doing this, so that you can at least have a mental position or prediction of how it would impact you. But I would also say in this environment, reducing your dependency on a single market is so important.
Yeah.
Because for obvious reasons, right? You can be executing everything right to the perfection, but one geopolitical event happen could completely change your business, right? So understanding this is so important. That's why I would recommend reading Ray Dalio's Changing World Order. I read that a couple of years ago. I probably want to reread that again. It's a history book, but from the lens of a financer, and how it would impact the capital market, for example. And a lot of what he said, not his prediction, but he mentioned how empires fell, destroyed, how new empires took off. We are seeing this in front of our own eyes in real time. Right.
Quite a few people have recommended that. It's a great read. My last question here is, what's the best business advice you've received?
There are so many, but I guess kind of back to my my point about unrecognizable every 2 years. I learned something. This is from Rakuten's CEO. He's a single founder. He said something like, there's a rule of 3 and 10. When he grew from a single founder to 3 people, everything's broken in the company. He fixed that. 5, 10 people, everything was broken again. He fixed all that. And then 30 people, and then 100 people. Each milestone, he has to fix that. And I have to testify, he's pretty much spot on. So because scaling from a 2-founder, 3-founder startup or 4-founder startup to hundreds of employees, thousands of employees, you have to be unrecognizable every 2 years a few times, right? So I think the best advice I have received, long way to say, is have that growth mindset and be a learning machine, and just keep on learning, because next year, if you don't learn fast enough, you'll be left behind by your fast-growing company.
All right. Wow, that's some great advice. Thank you, Allen. I learned a ton while I was learning about the story of Wattpad is something I've always been curious about. So thank you. And For those listening, if you're interested in connecting with Allen or reading his blog, we're going to leave more information down below. Allen's Thoughts, right? That's the name of the blog post.
Yep.
We'll leave a link anyways. If you like this type of content, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Leave a comment and let us know what you think. Thank you so much for listening.